Coming up next on The Voice of Alabama Politics, the Moore Corfman trial ends. Also, school choice or robbing education. And the legislature wants to turn everyone into Dirty Harry. Oh! Shoot 'em up, bang, bang, baby. All this and much, much more coming up next on The V. Welcome to The Voice of Alabama Politics, where we tackle the tough issues so you have the hard facts. I'm your host, Bill Britt, and today I'm joined by Susan Britt, research guru extraordinaire, and all-around great guy, Josh Moon, investigative reporter and columnist at APR. Welcome all.
Nice.
Hi, guys.
I really like it when Angie's not here. I get such a great introduction.
You do.
Yeah.
Well, I tell you, I don't know, they went back into regular session and the foolishness is multiplying exponentially. This past week, it seems that the Republicans in the legislature are bound to turn every citizen in Alabama into a Dirty Harry character and put a gun in their hand and, and it's free for all congressional, constitutional, God bless America. Everybody needs a gun. Josh, they are going to pass a bill that says anybody can carry a firearm anywhere they want to, on their person, and conceal it.
Yeah, and every single law enforcement officer that you talk to is against it. They have to the point where several of them rallied outside the State House to show their disagreement with the bill and what's behind it. They say it'll make the public less safe. It'll make them less safe. And they have good examples of this, of how this would make the public less safe and how it would make their jobs harder and more scary to go to every day, which is exactly what you want. Anytime you can get a piece of legislation that makes cops less safe and more scared, then you know it's a great piece of legislation, right? I mean, it's ridiculous. I mean, it is. And they boiled this thing down to make it seem like that police and sheriffs, they only want the revenue that comes from the permit. When the sheriffs have given up a large chunk of this revenue over the last several years, just to kind of thwart this nonsensical idea that that's the reason why they're pushing back against this thing. It actually does help them. It helps the entire public in being able to take guns off the streets from people who don't need them and should not have them and have ill intentions of carrying one. And if you're against that, then it looks to me like you're kind of anti-police.
I mean, Susan, you and I both have concealed carry permits.
We do.
One lawmaker said, it could take you weeks to get one.
No, that's not true. We went to the Etowah County Courthouse, less than 15 minutes for both permits. I mean, that's just pandering to the bill. I don't think even Jefferson County. I mean, you get it when you go.
Yeah, I mean, they do a background check, and that's one of the reasons that we have it, is so that you actually can go into the sheriff's office and have somebody at least lay an eyeball on you and run a background check so that they know whether you're fit to carry a weapon.
I mean, we don't really want people with mental illnesses, serious mental illnesses out there bearing firearms. I'm sorry.
No, we don't. And look, it helps. It helps to know where they are. I know people don't like that, but industrialized, civilized nations around the world do not have the type of open gun laws that we do. Australia doesn't. Very civilized group of folks in Australia that primarily come from criminal stock.
Yeah, the former prisoner colony. You're right. people make this argument all the time and say, well, it's our right. It's all right. Well, free speech is your right too, but you can't just say anything about anybody at any time. There are limits and there are laws and there are restrictions on what you can say and what you can't say. And this is a very fair restriction that has been intended to keep the public safe. And we have selected this group of people that are already assigned with keeping the public safe to make this judgment call. I don't know who else would be better than them to make the judgment call on who should be able to carry a permit. And like y'all said, it's very easy to do this. It's not hard. If you should in fact be carrying a weapon. The only people who have trouble with this are criminals for the most part. So,
and people that somehow interpret the Constitution. And look, the Supreme Court may come back and rule that, hey, put a gun in every hand. I mean, it could absolutely happen over this New York case. So, but we don't know. But it just seems counterintuitive to me to go against law enforcement so that you can carry an AK-47 or an AR-15 to Walmart.
I don't really think that the problem that we have in America and in Alabama and in many of our major cities is we have too few guns. As far as I can tell, that's not really an issue for anybody.
Not a problem. Yeah. Hey, I want to move on because you were talking about freedom of speech. So they're ready to pass another bill that is going to make it much more difficult to protest, which is part of your First Amendment constitutional right, Susan.
They want your Second Amendment, but they're willing to walk all over your First Amendment right. Now, this is coming out of all the reaction to George Floyd and all of that, which we saw in Huntsville started as a peaceful protest. And the police accelerated that into a riot, not the people that were there to protest. So now if it's a judgment call on a police officer's behalf of whether you're actually peacefully protesting or rioting, and they just get to decide whether you go to jail.
And then they hold you for 24 hours because they said you were rioting. They hold you for 24 hours without any representation, and a minimum of 30 days in jail.
Josh, listen, this is right out of the 1960 Civil Rights Playbook. This is the Bull Connor Playbook. That's what it should be termed, is the Bull Connor Bill, because this is exactly what they did. They used this sort of tactics to attack the people who are protesting, unfair and unjust laws and looking for equal representation and equal voting rights. They use this to attack them. That way you could put them in prison and show their employers, oh, look, you can't trust this guy. He's a criminal. And so you end up ruining the lives of these people that were there to simply protest, and it's all based on the judgment of the law enforcement officers who are there, which if we have seen anything and we've learned anything from Huntsville, their judgment is not always the soundest.
No. I mean, this is the thing that truly bothers me is this, what you said, Susan. This is a knee-jerk reaction to the protest over violating the civil rights of a black man to the point that they murdered him. The guy was found guilty of murdering George Floyd. Now, I mean, so this is backlash to people protesting. Josh, I don't.
Yeah, it's a whole. It was a protest about the entire injustice that often befalls black people in our criminal justice system. This was George Floyd's death was terrible, certainly, and it was the touching off point of this. But there were a lot of built up emotions over the course of the last several decades of the way the system has treated a number of black people, and so this was a protest that grew across America, and I think it touched a lot of people and was going to change a lot of lives and a lot of systems.
Well, we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics. We'll be right back.
My dog Jupiter is frightened when I climb too high, the owl said.
Check for monsters, Daddy.
I did, honey. There are no monsters. You're perfectly safe.
Protect yourself and those you love. Vaccinate now.
So you got caught speeding. But this time, you got more than a ticket.
What are you in for?
Vehicular homicide.
Stop speeding before speeding stops you. Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. They say that money is the mother's milk of politics, Susan. We just got the final filings for the fourth quarter in the Senate race between Katie Britt, Mo Brooks, and Mike Durant. We are not related to Katie Britt or her husband, Wesley.
Correct.
We do know them as we know Mo Brooks. We do not know Durant because he won't talk to the press. That's his new strategy. But Susan, you got some crazy numbers out there. Katie Britt is still knocking it out of the park.
Yeah. Katie Britt raised, and you said mother's milk. Remind viewers that when you're talking about raising money from the public, that's them voting for you initially before they actually get to the ballot. Katie raised $1.2 million in the last 3 months of the year. Durant raised $164,000, even though he was claiming to have raised $4 million.
Right.
The reason he was claiming to have raised $4 million is because he loaned himself $4 million.
Right.
Okay, big difference there. And Brooks raised $382,000. So I'd say that Katie kind of got the lead on that one a little bit.
Josh, overall, Katie Britt, I think, has got about $4 million on hand after everything is cleared. Mo Brooks has about $2 million. Durant has 2.5 after loaning himself $400 for $4 million. But I think what's interesting to me is, at least here, is that Donald Trump's preferred candidate, Mo Brooks, can't seem to raise money if his life depended on it. That million something that he had in the bank was over the years he was in the U.S. House. Now, if you were sitting in Mar-a-Lago and looking at this, you would go, my guy can't raise money. Now, I don't know the president personally. I have met him, the former president personally. I've met him once. But I know fundraising is an important key for him. So he's endorsed a guy who can't raise a dollar, hardly.
Yeah, fundraising, grifting, same thing. And so, yeah, you got to think that as important as grifting is to Donald Trump, that he's really upset with Mo Brooks being unable to do it successfully. Now, I agree that I think, what has been impressive to me, at least in the last overall reports that have come out, is that Britt has been able to get a number of small donations around. That they're not a concentrated group of people. I mean, she has some large donations from folks and the backing of a lot of organizations and stuff, but she also has a lot of money flowing in from just your average voters, small type donations, and that usually is a pretty good indication of how well you're penetrating in terms of name recognition and in terms of making the rounds across the state. And so that to me has been the most impressive thing. Mo Brooks is, I don't know how you can be, in politics that long and raise so little money and still be a viable candidate in the race.
Another point in Britt's fundraising is a large majority, I'm talking a large majority of her fundraising is coming from within Alabama. Yeah. It's not coming from D.C. or out of state. It's coming from inside the state of Alabama.
And, Durant only raising $160,000 and then loaning himself $4 million. This is another case of somebody who is not from Alabama, thinking they can come here and buy an election because they've made a lot of money off military contracts in Huntsville. Josh, I don't think people in general like it when you can buy an election.
No, I think people are a little bit leery when they see folks putting in $4 and $5 million of their own money, because that's just not relatable to the average person. And so, I do think that there is some hesitancy in that, and the fact that nobody really knows who Mike Durant is. I understand he's got the story with the Black Hawk Down helicopter, and he's got the story now with the stuff that occurred with the abuse of his sister that we've reported on, but. Nobody outside of, really knows that. I mean, those things were happening so long ago, and now this has just happened. And so I don't think that people recognize him.
And in all the speaking engagements, according to my understanding, he's not even really meeting the public after his speaking engagements. They are scurrying him out of there as fast as they can so he can avoid reporters.
Well, they sure don't want him talking to reporters because they don't want to bring up the incest in his family when his father basically raped his sister for years. And then Mike Durant, when he found out about it from his father, he was disappointed in his father, but he turned on his sister and lied about it. I mean, most candidates in a decent society would have just bow out.
Yeah.
Would not want that to be their defining moment, which I think, maybe not now, but I think by the time this race is over, Mike Durant will be defined by his betrayal of his sister. But we need to move on here. There are dueling polls out there. Club for Growth, which is backing Mo Brooks, their multi-gazillion dollar PAC. They said that Mo was leading by about 35. Said Durant was in 30 and Katie Britt was back in the 20s. I don't buy that poll because their poll showed Brooks at over 50% in June, Josh. So the guy's going backwards, right?
Yeah, I don't really buy that either. I mean, and you're always kind of leery of any poll that comes out and they don't tell you exactly, what the questions were or how it was conducted, and so those sorts of things. Now, the one that I would put more stock in is, I believe, the second one that you're going to mention, the one that was just released, and it was released by the Brit campaign. But the thing that was a little better about that poll was that. When they first contacted people for this polling, their initial question before they gave any information about anything was, here are your three candidates. Who right now would you vote for?
Right.
And that's just an initial poll test question, basically. And it just it's a good gauge of who people know, who they're leaning towards at this particular point. And in that particular poll, Katie Britt was leading by a point.
Right. So it was 29 for Britt, 28 for Brooks, 23 for Durant. And Susan, the margin of error there was a little less than 3%. You and I were talking earlier, and I would bet in the final analysis in this primary, the winner and the loser will be within 3 points of each other. I think it's going to be that close.
Yeah. It's going to be a very close race. I wouldn't be surprised if that's not it. That's not exactly where we are when we get to the primary.
I mean, Josh, this is what the numbers look like. I know Mo Brooks wants to run against Durant. He does not want to run against Britt, so that's why they've been talking up him. But I think that poll, if any, and I'm always cautious of any poll, is probably the most accurate. 29 Britt, 28 Brooks, 23 Durant. But we're going to have to leave it right there. You're watching the voice of Alabama politics.
You'll never guess what 400,000 people in the U.S. were using when they crashed their cars last year. No, not this. This. Distracted driving will kill you. Drive safe, Alabama. A message from your Alabama Department of Transportation.
My dog Jupiter is frightened when I climb too high, the owl said.
Check for monsters, Daddy.
I did, honey. There are no monsters. You're perfectly safe.
Protect yourself and those you love. Vaccinate now.
Welcome back to the voice of Alabama politics. Susan, we are told, or we have seen, what Senator Dale Marsh is calling the mother of all school choice bills. And I've heard from a lot of other people that it's some other kind of mother. But that being said, this bill being sponsored by Senator Marsh and Representative Meadows basically will take about $420 million out of the Education Trust Fund and give it to parents in a savings account so that they can send their kids to public school, private school, or homeschool them.
Geez, that doesn't sound like a disaster waiting to happen to me at all.
No.
At all. I mean, you're taking money out of the trust fund, you're giving it to the parents to send them to private schools. That looks like there's no think it through there somewhere, of course.
Yeah, I like to point out one thing. The budget office yesterday, or the legislative fiscal office, released the actual number on this thing, and they said it was going to be at a minimum $540 million.
Oh, wow, okay.
That was going to come out of this. So, so that's where we're starting. And it's hard to really pick a starting point of where to talk about the bad things with this. I mean, do you start with the fact that it's going to give public tax dollars to private corporations that have no oversight whatsoever? Right. Does that trouble anybody at all? What if I told you we were going to do that in other areas of our state? Does it trouble you more that some of the public tax dollars are going to be going to corporations that don't reside in Alabama, don't do business, aren't located here? You could actually send a kid to school in Mississippi and pay for it with your Alabama tax dollars. Does it trouble you more that you can hire unlimited numbers of people for consulting and all sorts of work? I mean, it is one of the biggest thefts of public education dollars, attempted thefts of public education dollars that I've ever seen in my life, and it's absurd. And I heard Dale Marsh, and I am willing to take Dale Marsh at his word that he wants desperately to help public education in this state. And if that is the case, then I don't know how you can take a look at the current funding structure of our school system and the AAA Act, which Dale Marsh also helped pass and has pushed for and expanded, and not recognize that those things are crushing our current public schools. You have kids who I put a question on Twitter yesterday and just asked public school teachers and administrators to tell me ways in which they are lacking supplies and resources. You should see the number of comments under that Twitter question, not to mention the dozens of emails that came to me of people telling me about not having enough textbooks, not having chairs in their class, not having to do repairs on the furniture, having classroom equipment that is so old and obsolete that you can't even buy parts for it anymore. I mean, these are the sorts of things that are plaguing Alabama classrooms, and it's because of the funding structure that punishes you for being a struggling, high-poverty school, instead of helping you for being in that situation and better educating those children.
And I think, Susan, if this passes, this will basically be the death knell for public education in Alabama. And this has been something they've wanted for a long time, is to take the money and send it to these private schools, these corporate schools, this type of thing, thinking that would make it a lot better. I don't see how this goes.
Look at Lead Academy as one of your examples of charter schools. It's a failing charter school. Never mind mentioning that Charlotte Meadows, who runs Lead Academy, is the sponsor of this bill. There's all kinds of numbers of problems with that. But, I mean, there's no regulation in this one. Are you going to send the money to an in-state institution? Are you going to send the money to a failing charter school? There's no control mechanisms in here at all.
And there's no testing. There's no way to account for how these funds. The funds are going to get lost. We know this.
Yeah, of course.
But there's also no accountability for how the children are faring in those schools. There's just no way to do it right now, and that's something that Eric Mackey brought up. But one last thing, Josh. Just go ahead, and then we're going to move on.
No, I just want to say that it's never, if you judge fairly, if you judge these schools fairly, there is never a time where, in the overall scheme of things, if you judge them fairly and give them a fair opportunity, that public schools don't do as good as or better job of educating the public school students than charter schools and private schools. It just doesn't happen. The times in which those charter schools excel more than the public schools, that's when they have more resources and they're more selective in the students that they take. That's the only times.
This was a long time ago, too. All right, so Roy Moore and Lee Corfman both sued each other over defamation in this trial where she accused him of misappropriate action towards her when she was a 14-year-old, and she sued him for saying that he didn't tell the truth about it, and the jury heard all this testimony and went, there's not enough evidence for us to judge one way or the other.
They said that neither one defamed the other, and I guess they defamed each other equally, is what they were saying.
I mean, if you looked at it, I think the jury just said, we don't know. It doesn't look like you did as much harm to either one of you.
I think that's probably an accurate. I think is probably an accurate description. And once again, the attorneys won. Really, they were the only winners out of this, is they all got paid, and I think the one thing that you can take from this is at least the jury pretty much said that they believed in what Lee Corfman said. That she was being honest in what she said back at that time. They just didn't believe that what Roy Moore then said was enough to qualify as defamation against her. And
I'm with the jury. It would have been a hard call. I have my own thoughts on it. But again, this is why we have jury trials on things like this, so they can make up their mind. To me, I didn't see anybody getting anything out of it, but Roy Moore's attorneys spun it that he was clearly vindicated, blah, blah, blah. Well, it's only vindicated on the fact that he didn't didn't defame her. Didn't have anything else to do.
Didn't say it didn't happen.
He still can't go to the Gadsden Mall, but
Well. Oh boy. Anyway,
I'm joking, Roy. I know you can go to the mall. Okay.
He can go to the mall. Just stay in the lingerie section, right?
Yeah. Right.
But no, listen. The jury spoke. I think it was about as good as a judgment as you could get given the circumstances.
I agree. I would agree.
Okay. All right, we're gonna have to leave it right there. You've been watching the voice of Alabama politics. You watch us because we watch them.